This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for, this is a bonus edition. I know I teased it earlier because originally we were going to do both of the NBA and the NFL big boards in one night. Couldn't do it, couldn't get it done. So we did the NBA one. We're now doing the NFL one now. This is Wednesday night. We're recording this, so you guys get it this week a little later. Twice is nice for the Primetime Podcast, the college sports podcast here on MVP. Before we get into our big board, got some housekeeping. First off, get ours out of the way. We got patreon.com/Most Valuable Podcast. That's how you help support the channel. Get some different tiers. That link down below in the description. Also, if you want an MVP t-shirt, the store link for MVP is also down in the description. If you want to catch all the stuff we're putting out, mostvaluablepodcast.com is where you go. That's where you get everything, audio podcasts, videos, everything right there at mostvaluablepodcasts.com. And then the last thing is go on to iTunes. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you're listening on iTunes, you're listening on your iPhone, go ahead and give the Primetime Podcast a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to both Brandon and I. But Brandon, before we get into everything, we got to give a special shout out and some special thoughts to friend of the show, Mo Hurst, who every time we've said his name, either on a mock draft, on a big board, we say friend of the show, Mo Hurst, because Mo was gracious enough to come on the show, talk a little about Michigan football. But the big news out of the combine was that Mo Hurst, same heart condition that I believe it was Star Latuile, had not, doesn't end the career, but still a scary situation. So Brandon and I, MVP, all wish Mo Hurst the best. We want to see nothing but the best. But I got a little thing, and I'm taking this from a podcast that I listen to in Kind of Funny. And they do a thing on their morning show called Sweet Nasty Love. I want to do the same thing right now. So if you're sitting there, open up a new tab, go to your Twitter. You're going to go ahead and tweet at Mo Hurst Jr. Go give Mo some sweet, nasty love. Just go ahead and just type something nice to Mo Hurst. Give him some sweet, nasty love. Let him know that we're all here with him, and we're all here. Everything we do, we're all here together. So taking it from Kind of Funny, we're giving Mo some sweet, nasty love here before the podcast. But Brandon, let's move into our big board. And how we do it, we start from the bottom, we go to the top. On YouTube, it's split up into 3 segments. If you're listening on audio form on podcasts around the world, you get it full in its entirety. Before we get into what we're going to talk about, how about we start with you? Start at 25. Give us your 16 through 25, starting at the bottom.
Well, to start things off, at number 25, I've got Shaquem Griffin. You got to put him there. After his showing, you got to put Shaquem Griffin at number 25. Outside linebacker, UCF. At 24, I've got Connor Williams, offensive tackle with Texas. At 23, I've got Sony Michel, running back, Georgia. At 22, Josh Jackson, cornerback from Iowa. At 21, I've got Calvin Ridley, wide receiver, Alabama. At 20, Harold Landry, outside linebacker, defensive end, Boston College. At 19, I've got Mo Hurst, defensive lineman, Michigan.
Friend of the show, Mo Hurst.
Friend of the show, Mo Hurst. Excuse me. At 18, I've got Darius Geis, running back, LSU. At 17, I've got Cortland Sutton, wide receiver, SMU. And at 16, I've got Marcus Davenport, defensive end, UTSA.
Well, now just going right into mine, it's starting out the same place that Brandon did. Shaquem Griffin, the outside linebacker from the national champion Central Florida Golden Knights. Then at number 24, cracking the list for the first time in my big board, Adam Lazar, the wide receiver from Iowa State. Funny thing about him, someone in the comment section way early on, like big board 1, was like, hey, watch out for Adam Lazar. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I watched some film, saw him at the combine, said, yeah, this kid's for real. Put him at 24 in my big board. Then 23, Mike Hughes, cornerback from national champion Central Florida. Then 22, Mike McGlinchey, the offensive tackle, almost said outside tackle, offensive tackle from Notre Dame. 21, Josh Jackson, the cornerback from Iowa. At 20, Calvin Ridley, the wide receiver from another national champion, Alabama Crimson Tide. 19, Derome bringing the pain from that same Alabama team, defensive tackle. Another Alabama player, Rashaan Evans, inside linebacker at number 18. 17, we've got the FSU safety, Derwin James. And then at number 16, wide receiver from SMU, Cortland Sutton. And Brandon, first thing I want to talk about, first person I want to hit, the guy who's basically, I know he didn't have the fastest 40-yard dash, but he stole the show at the combine. 4.3840, did 20 reps with a prosthetic arm, and had a broad jump of 117. Shaquem Griffin, he's at 25 in both of our big boards. I want to ask you this. He's a guy where early on before the combine, people said 4th, 5th round. Now, if you gather everything together, people are saying, 2nd and 3rd. Why? I'll tell you why I did it, but you tell me first, why did you put Shaquem Griffin, basically 25th best player in your draft?
Well, the reason why I put him there is for a number of reasons. Number one, because of what he was able to do in the bench press with a prosthetic arm. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's guys that can't do that with two perfectly...
Hello, I'm one of them.
Good working...
I can't even get one.
...arms
I can't get one.
And for him to do that, it doesn't just show that he's got tremendous strength, but it shows that he's got great heart. And I think that that's another thing that a team wants to be able to see, that they not only have someone who is an elite athlete and has great athleticism and has great strength, but also has great heart, that's going to go out there, that's going to hustle for them, that's going to work for them, that's never going to quit for them on the field. And now at the end of the day, do I think that Shaquem Griffin is going to be taken in the first round? Probably not. Mm-hmm. But do I think that he, certainly with what he did in terms of the bench press, his jump, his 40 time, all of that combined together, and then just knowing what he's working against, it's tremendous heart for me, in my opinion. That's why I put him where I put him, because he deserves that spot, that recognition.
Well, and I mean, I'm the same way. Everything that you said, same thing goes into my answer, but just to elaborate on it a little bit, and I know what some people are going to think. So ESPN plays their usual inspiration piece. Whenever you get a story like Shaquem Griffin, ESPN does the inspirational piece to get you going, get you feeling good about the story. After hearing it, though, the story that he's had to go through, where basically the whole thing with having the hand when he was 4 and being in his kitchen saying, I can't take the pain anymore, I just want to take a knife and cut the thing off. Basically making the decision at 4 years old to say, hey, you know what? I'm getting this thing amputated. I can't deal with it. Get it amputated. Then in college, because him and his brother, I believe his brother's in the NFL now with the Seattle Seahawks. In college, though, the coaching staff that was there before Scott Frost would not give him the chance. It was basically he said, he's like, I felt like, okay, you only recruited me to get my brother. You did not recruit me to get me. You recruited me and signed me so that my brother would come on to Central Florida. But then Scott Frost comes in, new coaching staff. They give him that chance. The season that he had this year, what he was able to do at the combine, I agree 110% with Von Miller. Basically, they asked Von Miller on first take. He goes, I would love to have Shaquem Griffin on my team. And they go, how high would you take him? And he goes, it's probably a good thing I'm not in the draft room come draft day, because he's like, I would take him as high as I could just to get him on my team, just because of the guy you're going to get along with the player. He's going to be, whatever team he goes to, he is going to be a great locker room guy on top of a guy that'll give you 110% on the football field. All you got to do is give him a chance. That's all you have to do. That's what Scott Frost did, and look at what he was able to do. The talent speaks for itself at the combine. That's a little bit, I feel like we're on the same page, why we both put him at 25. However, let's move on to the next guy we're going to talk about. Cornerback from Iowa, Josh Jackson, What are you thinking about Josh after the combine coming into our third big board of the season?
He did not have the combine that he wanted to. That's certainly what I can say. And I was very high on him. I actually before coming into the combine, I think I had him as my number one cornerback to go here in the draft. And he certainly has fallen from where he was, I think, on big board number 1 to where he was at big board 2, and this is now big board 3 for the NFL. So, he comes in, he's 6 foot, 196, and people said, and Mike Mayock was one of those guys who said, okay, if he's in the 4.4s in the 40, he's going to be okay. Well, he runs an unofficial 4.48, I think it was, or a 4.46. Let's see what it was. It was actually a 4.49 second sprint. But then it turns out the official time was 4.56. And then he ran it again, and it was 4.6. So that starts to get into the position of, are you going to be able to keep up with the elite wide receivers? Are you going to be able to do that? And I know that I know some people may say, well, man, that's so ticky-tacky. What's 4.4 versus 4.5 or 4.6? Well, a touchdown and being burnt for one. And that honestly is enough for a team to say, maybe I'm not going to take him as high as I would have previously.
And that's the thing. When you looked at me, and I don't want to say the 40 puts into everything that goes on, but like you look at from where I was at the beginning. At the very beginning, let's see, first big board, I had Josh Jackson at 21. You had him at 20. Then if we look to big board 2.0, I had him at 20. You had him stay right pat at 20. And now we get to the third one. He's gone back down to 21 for me, and he's gone down to 22 for you. So really he hasn't done enough to jump up. And the thing that with the 40 that I'll get to with it is two things. First off, before the combine, Todd McShay put out kind of like a guide to the combine, like red flags, what's outstanding. And for the cornerback position, what he says they usually look for. So he was at a 4.56 officially. Well, a red flag is 4.64. So he's okay there. He's not a red flag. The 5-year average, the average of the last 5 years of the combine, is a 4.52. So you're just below average. So the thing I look at is that you're not outstanding, so I shouldn't take you in basically the non-playoff teams, what would be the lottery for the NBA. I shouldn't take you there. However, if I'm late enough in the first round, I can start to think about you. One question I want to ask you about Josh Jackson, though. Tape don't lie. People are going to say, look to the tape. That's the real thing you want to look at. But what if at Iowa's Pro Day, he goes ahead and runs a 4.4 or a 4.48? Then are you saying, okay, I'm using that time or the combine time? Would it change your mind if he runs a faster time at Iowa's Pro Day?
Well, it would make me more comfortable knowing that he can do it, but I don't think that you could then, after what he ran, and you could say that, maybe it was a bad day, maybe he just didn't get a good run. I think that for anyone, and certainly someone, I understand that that's not like a long run, but for anyone who's running, any runner, they go out there.
It's a long run for me.
They just don't always have the best day. I get it. So I'd almost look somewhere in between the two of them then at that point. I'm not fully going in on, okay, he's a 4.4 runner consistently, but I'm not also saying that, oh, he's a 4.5. He's then somewhere right there in the middle. But a comparison for Josh Jackson would be to, how about Marcus Peters? Similar in build and size. Peters ran a 4.53 40. He was a late first-round pick. He had 19 interceptions in 3 seasons. With the Kansas City Chiefs in his first 3 seasons with the Chiefs, and he was one of the elite corners. Now, if Jackson's able to be anywhere near and similar to what Peters is, you're going to get yourself a really good cornerback, and you're going to get yourself a really good playmaker, and that you have to remember, is what Josh Jackson is and was in college, especially for Iowa with what he was doing when he's, playing teams like Ohio State, and he has 3 interceptions in a game against Ohio State, the game where they blew Ohio State out this past season. Josh Jackson was the big playmaker in that one. So there shouldn't be a question. We shouldn't say, okay, with a bad or a poor 40 time, he's no longer a good playmaker.
No.
That's not true. He can still make the plays. He can still hang with the best of them. But if he's not going to, if he doesn't have that elite quickness, is he going to be an elite cornerback? Because is he going to get burned? Is he going to be, is he going to be the Eli Apple of this next draft? Because Eli Apple really struggled this past season. I think everyone, realizes that. But also, those are, again, 2 completely different players. But that's just, it goes to show again with, even a 40 time and a difference of a couple of seconds or points of a second, it certainly makes a difference in the mind of a GM, a scout, and a team.
Well, and the thing that I just wanted to go off of, it's not just, like you said, it's not just the 40. Let's look at the whole picture really quick, before we go into the wide receivers. For the drills at the combine, the Todd McShay put the cornerback one on because it's important. So we already talked about the 40. He's slightly below average. At the vertical jump, he had a 38. He's slightly above average. He's basically 38 is what he had. 40 is outstanding. The average is 35.8. So he's right in the middle between outstanding and average. So we're going to slot him at above average. His 20-yard shuttle, outstanding for a cornerback, is 3.95. The 5-year average is a 4.19. He ran a 4.03. Yet again, right in between outstanding and average, above average. And that's a drill that's going to, for a cornerback, that is what I want to look at because that judges your reaction time, your reaction speed. All right, he's above average. He's not a lost cause, basically. Broad jump doesn't have it down, although he did a 1-2-3. The 3-cone, he had a 6.86. However, that's not there for a cornerback. The only other one he has for a cornerback is the bench press. The average the last 5 years, 14.5. Outstanding is 20.9. Josh Jackson had 18 on the dot. So, I mean, all the other things besides that 40, above average. So we'll have to wait until March 26th to see how he runs that 40.
And again, that's why I think that you can knock him on the 40 a little bit, but you can't knock him overall. That's why you have to keep him still in your first round, in your top 25 players. Because
I like that vertical jump. Like, give me somebody who can jump up and contest the wide receiver at the highest point.
Yeah, I mean, there's more than just one dimension of your game, or at least there should be if you're going to be one of the good elite cornerbacks, and that's something that I still think that he can be. I dropped him obviously 2 spots because of the 40, but that's truly I don't think that's anything. It's not like I dropped him 7 spots or something like that. I still think that he can be elite.
Well, I mean, you also got to look at it. There were guys like, I'm trying to look for you where you might have had them. Like, for example, in your 2.0, you didn't have Marcus Davenport. He's at 16. That's a guy that's going to bump Josh Jackson back. I'm trying to see if you had anyone else that could have bumped him, maybe like a Mo Hurst or a Harold. Yeah, like a Harold Landry took a little jump for you. So it's like guys rise, and that's another thing with these big boards. It's not necessarily you fell because you did anything. It was just, hey, I'm going to put you stationary. Oh, wait, but this guy rose a little bit. Okay, you go down 1. All right, now this guy rose a little bit. All right, now you're going down another thing. That's kind of the yin and yang of how this all works.
Yeah.
But let's move on into the last thing we were going to talk about for this first chunk, and that's the wide receivers. And there's one guy in particular I want to start with, but then kind of bring everything in on this, because both you and I have a combined 3 wide receivers in this bottom group. We all have Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley, and then I have Alan Lazar, who is also there as well. And the guy I want to start with is Calvin Ridley, because this was a guy, looking back to Big Board 2.0, I had him at 14, you had him at 12. Going back all the way to our first Big Board, I had him at 11, you had him at 12. So this is a guy who is now falling about 8 to 9 spots from 1 all the way to Big Board 3. At the Combine, what he ran, what he did, what his results was, a 4.340, a 4.4340, 15 bench press, 31 vert jump, 11.10 broad jump, 6.88 cone drill, and a 4.41 20-yard shuttle. Brandon, after the Combine, after everything, you're starting to see more as we start to dissect Calvin Ridley a little bit. What in your mind justified the fall that we've seen from Big Board 2 now to Big Board 3?
Well, it's that he's still a really good wide receiver, and I think that he'll be certainly a playmaker and an impact maker on any team, but I just don't know if he's the number 1 wide receiver for a team. Mm-hmm. And that's why I guess I saw him fall in my big board, is because he, I hate knocking guys for size, but, Wes Welker was never a number 1 wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Guys like that, they're not necessarily your number 1 wide receivers. And that's where with Calvin Ridley, he's more of your, and I hate using this comparison because I don't really think this guy's all that great. He's more your Ted Ginn. He's more, he's going to get you down the field. Hopefully his hands are better. Yeah. And I think they are. They can't be worse. But I think that's where Calvin Ridley is a guy who brings you excellent explosiveness. He's got great acceleration. He's got great long speed to get down the field. Those types of things are going to make him what he will be for the team, and that he's going to be that deep threat. And a team that needs that deep threat is going to want him. But they, and we've talked about this so many times, when a team wants that number 1 wide receiver, they're looking for that 6'2", that 6'3", that 6'4" guy that so many teams have started to go after and look at as their number 1. Calvin Ridley is still going to be a really good receiver, but I just don't know if he'll be able to be that number 1. And I do think that size is holding him back because of that.
The thing I love most is the comparison that they have for him, unless they changed it on the draft profile for NFL.com. Because let me throw this out. I'll get your first reaction of how you think about it. The guy that they compare him to is Marvin Harrison, the wide receiver that was with the Colts for so many years, because they're the same size. Marvin Harrison, 6 foot 185 as a wide receiver. The thing, though, that you got to think about, wow, that's a really good pro comparison. It'd be great if Calvin Ridley was about 20 years before his time. Like, if he was coming up 1998 to 2006, all right, you're the number 1 wide. You can be a number 1 wide receiver because the game was different. The game of football wasn't like it is now. Now you've got, I can't remember who they were talking to on NFLLive.com. I think it was, or it was NFL Live on ESPN. I think it was Graziano who said this. And he goes, the NFL game has changed so much that, like, on defense, when you're looking at a safety, you now have to get a safety who's got the size and the height to go man-to-man with a tight end who can come up and play a man-to-man on a Gronkowski, on a Kelsey, on a guy who is playing tight end because of what they are. Like, tight ends aren't just, hey, you know what, go and block. Hey, we might throw you the ball on an out route. Tight ends are now, hey, we're going to push the ball down the field in this passer league. And just to kind of do the same thing that we did for Josh Jackson, when it comes to wide receiver, an elite outstanding 40 is a 4.4 40. He is just below that. So he is above average, close to outstanding on his 40. On his vertical jump, which nowadays you're looking at, because I want that number 1 wide receiver who can go up and get the ball, the outstanding is 40. The 5-year average is 35. The red flag is 32. He got 31. It's a red flag for me. Like that, like in this day and age, you're fast, that's good. That's why Ted Ginn, I kind of like that comparison too, because Ted Ginn's not a guy who's going to jump and get the ball. He's going to use his speed to get open. But in today's NFL, if my number one wide receiver, I need to go on the outside, go one-on-one, and know you're going to meet it at the highest point and be able to jump high. That I don't really like. Then you go to the shuttle. That's mostly defensive positions there. For the broad jump, McShay has an outstanding is a 124. The average is 120. Red flag is 109. His was 110. Again, another jumping drill. And I know this one isn't for height, but that is also, you're in that range where you're kind of skating that red flag area. And then the last one, they have a wide receiver numbers. They don't even have the bench press down, even though he did only 15 of them. That's the thing with Calvin Ridley is all of this, again, like we said for Josh Jackson, is it make or break at the combine? No. But these are things that we're going to dissect and we're going to look at and go, hey, you know what? If you can't go up there, and I don't think you can be that number one wide receiver who can get the ball at the highest point, then why should I draft you as high as we thought? Or let you slide and just see if you're waiting for me later in the draft?
Well, the reason why he could still actually be taken fairly early is because it's a really poor wide receiver class. And he is one of the best wide receivers in what is relatively a weak wide receiver class. So he's got the skills, he's got the speed, he's got the route running ability. You know, that says a lot. And I think that speaks the hops. That speaks volumes. And we shouldn't just like with Josh Jackson, we shouldn't just knock him because of a 40 time. Yep. We can't just knock Calvin Ridley because he's not going to be the most elite jumper. Another guy that I want to kind of bring up as a comparison to him, guy who was 5'10", so a little shorter than what Ridley is, Lee Evans. Lee Evans for Buffalo. That was a guy who could get down the field, had some really good speed, had some good bursts, and just looking at his stats that Lee Evans had, his career was 2004 to 2011. So in his first 2 years, 48 catches, 843 yards, then 743 yards, 9 TDs, then 7 TDs. His best season was 2006, 82 catches, over 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns. I could see a Calvin Ridley as something like that being like a cap for one of his best seasons. But if he could typically have a 60 to 65 reception season, over 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns, that's pretty good. What about him becoming the team's Golden Tate? Because Golden Tate, he's not going to he's going to put up good numbers, but he's a smaller guy. He's your over the middle type of guy, and he's not necessarily your deep threat. That seems to be more Marvin Jones when it comes to that, but I mean, route running, that's Golden Tate's thing. So there's a lot of comparisons of what are good receivers. Golden Tate, good receiver. Lee Evans was a good receiver. I think that Calvin Ridley's going to be just fine, but he's going to be what he is. He's not going to be that, and I don't think he's going to be that elite wide receiver. He's going to be a good receiver, but I don't think he's going to be an elite wide receiver because he's not going to be able to match up against a cornerback. He's 6 foot, 189, and the cornerback is going to be, the same size, maybe bulkier, and that's going to be tougher for Calvin Ridley, which is why he's going to win those with superb route running and speed.
Well, and that's why I want to bring in the other wide receivers now. So let's look at, I'm going to throw some combine numbers out there for you guys at home. So we just looked at Calvin Ridley's. Let's look at the guy that both you and I had above Calvin Ridley on this big board, Courtland Sutton. He's a guy that's 6'3", 218, bigger and taller than Calvin Ridley. So he's got the height on him. When it came to the 40-yard dash, he ran a slower 40. He had a 4.54, which if we're looking at the baseline of what we've been doing, that puts him right around average. A 4.53 for wide receivers has been average, puts him right there around the average mark, slightly below average if we're going to be technical. Then the vertical jump. A 35 is average. He got a 35.5. Yet again, right there, average, slightly above average for Courtland Sutton. And then the last one, the broad jump, 120 is average, 124 is outstanding. He had 124, so he's in that outstanding range. So for me, when I looked at Courtland Sutton, this is why I put him ahead, is not knocking Ridley completely for the combine, but now my questions, I'm having a little bit more questions of who would I rather have if I had one pick and I needed a top wide receiver, a guy to be my number one. Who do I want? A guy like Calvin Ridley, who my question is, can he go up and get the ball? Or a guy like Courtland Sutton, who, yeah, might be a 10th slower on the 40, but has 3 inches on, 2 to 3 inches, depending on where you look, and can jump higher than Calvin Ridley. That's why Sutton, to me, is ahead of Ridley right now in our 3.0. Why did you put him above Ridley?
And where I am with that is that Courtland Sutton, again, 6'3", 218, he's got the tools, with those tools being his size, his athleticism, being able to go up, contest the catches. Some people have compared him to the Brandon Marshall type, and
it's a good comparison
and that's
compared to,
and that's a good thing. So those are the tools that he certainly has, but he's not a finished product.
Yes.
Whereas I look at Calvin Ridley.
You think of him more as a finished product?
What you see is what you're probably going to get with Calvin Ridley. What you see right now with Courtland Sutton is hopefully not what you're going to get from him in year 2, in year 3, and beyond. So he's not done yet. He's still got some things to learn and even get better on.
Let me ask you this, though, and this might play into why you put him above Ridley. Is because of what you just said, that would mean his ceiling is higher than Calvin Ridley.
Correct.
And that's why you have him higher than Ridley right now?
Yes, correct. And because, again, like I mentioned, he's got more room to grow, meaning that he may not be, he's not that finished product, he's not as polished, but he does have the ceiling that's higher.
I got 3 more guys. I'll give these 3 guys what they did at the combine, then we'll talk about them and then move on. So the next one, 5'11", wide receiver, James Washington. For the 40, ran a 4.54, same as Courtland Sutton, right around average for a wide receiver. Then if we go to the vert jump, he had a 34.5. That is 0.5 below average, so slightly below average, the other side of where Courtland Sutton was. Then if we go to the broad jump, he was at a 120, which is right on dot for the 5-year average for the wide receiver position. Then moving on, another guy that we've talked about before, the 5'10 wide receiver from Texas A&M, Christian Kirk, 4.47 40, so a faster 40 than the average that we've seen with the last 2 guys that we've had. However, he's not quite, he's just 0.07 below that outstanding, but he's closer to it. Then the vert jump, he had a 35.5, same boat as Courtland Sutton. You're slightly above average. And then on the broad jump, he had a 115, which is slightly below average. And the last receiver I have is the guy who cracked my big board for the first time, Allen Lazard, who, if we're looking at height, 6'5", the tallest of any of the guys out there, 6'5", 227, has an arm span of 32 and a quarter, and his 40, 4.55. So the slowest we've seen, but like we said, it's right on, it's slightly below the average of a 4.53 for the wide receivers. But you look at the other ones, you look at the vert, 38, the closest we've seen, I believe he tied Courtland Sutton, the closest we've seen to that outstanding of a 40. And then on top of it, the broad jump, he was at 122, which is in the middle, right between the outstanding of 124 and the 120. This is a kid then also looking at him catch balls at the combine. This was a kid that I looked at and I went, give me a little bit more. Give me like a little bit more time to dive into some tape, and he could be my top wide receiver when I'm done with it. Like, he has that potential to me to be like him and Cortland Sutton to me have higher ceilings than Calvin Ridley.
Well, let me make just a couple of quick points about the receivers that you just talked about. So James Washington, I think maybe
he's not on our big board.
No, I think he was in my first one. I believe he was, or I thought about putting him there because
he was at 10 on your first one.
So I like him, obviously. I think that
and then he was at 11.
I think that he was really good when he was with Oklahoma State. Obviously, you're going to be good when you're a wide receiver for
and
Oklahoma
with the quarterback
State.
You have
Exactly, but he's really good at he's quick getting off the line. He can blow past cornerbacks. He's got really good downfield tools, and when I say tools, I mean he's got good downfield speed. He's really good at going up in a jump ball situation. Even though he's only 5'11", he's really competitive in those. With Christian Kirk, he's really dangerous with the football in his hands. Everyone knows that. He's got good separation skills, so he's really that's going to be one of the things I think that sets him apart is what he's able to do to get away from defenders. And then with Lazard, I think that's a 6'5" guy. You just can't overlook that. You can't look past that. At 6'5", you got to get a little excited, and any team will.
Yeah, and that's why with me, I am already excited for Lazard. Like I said, right now I've got him at 24. I expect him to climb. I expect the more, because he's out of the wide receivers, the least amount of film I have watched, but the more I dive into him, I'm already in. I just can't wait to watch more of it. But any final thoughts on any of the guys, maybe 16 to 25? Maybe we didn't mention that you want to throw in any of the guys we did talk about?
I know we didn't talk about this guy, and I don't want to talk about him now because we don't have time. But I just want to throw it out there.
Quick snippet.
Sony Michel. I like him. I really do like him as a running back. I think that he's a hard runner. He's aggressive. He's really good, and
he wasn't in your first draft.
And he was put on display more so, I think, towards the end of his time with Georgia, and he was fun to watch, and I think that will translate to the NFL.
Well, this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think of 16 through 25 and any of the guys that we talked about in this range.